Elizabeth, Lady Betty, Sugrue, the hangwoman of Roscommon. In Ireland's tempest-battered landscape of the 18th century, there arose a woman who would confront not only the standards of femininity, but justice and morality. She was Elizabeth Sugrue, but legend and history remembered her as Lady Betty, not a warrior, not a queen, something much more chilling, a female executioner. But her existence is not one of simple villainy and heroism. It's a piece of grays, poverty, violence, trauma, survival. How does the murdering hand become female? And, more to the point, how does a society permit her to? Let us glance backward. Lady Betty's Ireland was a troubled nation, divided by colonial rule, famine, rebellion, and brutal class war. Out in the rural western edges, life was hard and brief. Elizabeth Sugrue was born near the start of the 18th century, reputedly in County Kerry. Little is documented about her early life, but what we can ascertain is that she lost her husband early on in life, and before long had her son with her in the town of Roscommon, which would be both her refuge and stage for greatness. By all accounts, she was destitute, charitably so. Some of them describe her begging on the street for coins. Others, she did odd jobs and washing. What is most generally agreed, though, is that she spent a lifetime of cold solitude with her son as her only companion, and then disaster, or horror, struck. Legend has it, one day her grown son just got up and left without so much as a by your leave. Weeks passed. There had been a rumor that he went abroad or even joined the British Army. Upon his eventual return, word had it that he knocked at her door at midnight, hoping perhaps to catch her unawares. But Betty, demented and enraged, thought that he was a burglar. In fury or fear, she stabbed him with a fireplace poker or knife, to wake up the next morning and see the dead body of the young man at her feet, to be her own son. Whether this tale is literal truth or Gothic romance, it shows the breakdown and devastation that resulted. Lady Betty was taken into custody, charged with murder, and imprisoned in Roscommon Gaol, awaiting her own hanging. But then, luck smiled. A public hanging was being organized at the jail in 1789. Various prisoners were to be executed, but the hangman scheduled to perform the task had died, fled, or refused. With increasingly infuriated mobs demanding justice outside, the authorities were between a rock and a hard place. That's when Elizabeth Sugrue stepped in. For a reprieve, she volunteered to carry out the hangings. And she did, unflinchingly. In front of an amazed witness, a woman had hanged a group of men on the hangman's scaffold. Nobody was actually able to get their heads around what they had just witnessed. She wasn't granted amnesty, but she wasn't executed either. And then she was employed. Lady Betty was then formally commissioned as the executioner of Roscommon. She had killed dozens, if not hundreds, of men over the years. She was also said to be whipping prisoners, docking ears or noses as punishment, and preparing the dead for exhibition by some. She allegedly wore a full cloak and hood, and she was the stuff of legend and folklore, everyone's nightmare. Children were threatened. Behave, or Lady Betty will get you. Others said that she started to enjoy her dreadful work. Others said that she resigned herself to her role as part of an oppressive regime. But let us not confuse this with an empowerment story. Elizabeth Sugrue existed in a world where women, especially poor women, had no choice. She did not rise to power. She clung by the scruff of her neck so she would not starve. Her choice as an executioner was not bravery, it was survival. But she was different. Throughout the centuries, men held the profession of executioner. England and France, China and the Ottoman Empire, the executioner's hood was donned by a man. It was degrading, humiliating work, but men's work, not women's. Elizabeth Sugrue broke with that tradition. Why? Because the culture allowed it, took it even. Public 18th century Irish hangings were not merely punishment. They were spectacle, theater, and warning. Hundreds attended to see the criminals hang. There was a requirement for executioner and fear of the same. Lady Betty was essentially a part of the social machinery, but she intruded upon others too. For a woman, especially an elderly one, to be the cause of death was not decorous. People would treat her like a freak or even an animal. Her legend became so distorted that writers in the 19th century began to build legends around her. Some no doubt exaggerations, some chillingly plausible. In one such tale, she is presented with an episode where she saw a man standing in line for hanging, a former adversary perhaps, or lover. She purportedly demanded to hang him herself. In another tale, she is reported to have declined payment to pardon a convict and that she would not besmirch her duty. These stories raise more questions than solutions. Was she numb, or did she have a sense for every mortality? Was she bringing justice, or was she a tool of cruelty, owned by a system that couldn't find another to do its dirty work? Even the nickname bestowed upon her, Lady Betty, it is ironic. It bestows upon her a dignity which she probably never enjoyed during life, maybe something that assuages the public opinion of a woman taking the place of a man by placing her in sarcastic nobility. Finally, last was her turn. She passed away, allegedly, in the early 1800s, sometime between 1802 and 1807. According to some, she passed away peacefully. To others, she was buried in an unmarked grave, feared even in death. Whatever the truth, one thing is sure: Lady Betty was erased from the records of history, but she remained in local lore, a warning, a ghost, a legend. Today, in Roscommon Gaol, an old jail now a heritage center, you can learn part of her tale in an exhibit, but no gravestone, no statue, just hearsay. What do we know about Elizabeth Sugrue? Was she a murderer, a victim, a poverty-stricken brute, or a woman driven to the unthinkable by a system so cruel that survival was all that counted? Her story asks us to look beyond a more profound question. What do we require of the ones to whom we hold culpable? And what do we expect of the ones we assign to pass that judgment? Lady Betty was never queen, saint, or feminist heroine, but she lived, and her life operates in opposition to our presupposition about justice, gender, and history. She possessed no power. She suffered it, and for that maybe we owe her more than a few ghost stories. And that is the haunting story of Elizabeth Lady Betty Sugrue, a woman born into poverty, struck by unbearable loss, who somehow became the face of death for others. Was she a victim of circumstance, or did she embrace the gallows to survive in a world that offered her no mercy? Lady Betty's tale forces us to confront the uncomfortable spaces between justice and desperation, between punishment and survival. She wasn't a queen, a general, or a rebel. She was just a mother, a prisoner, and then an executioner. If this story made you think, unsettled you, or opened a window into a forgotten corner of history, please give it a like. Share it with someone who'd find it as fascinating as you did, and consider subscribing to the channel. We're uncovering hidden histories every week, stories that deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay curious, stay critical, and keep fathoming the past.